I'll now get on to the main bit of the tutorial really, and that's showing you how to control parameters in Quartz from Max. And this involves the use of open sound control objects. If I just come onto the library, type OSC, you'll see I've got a few OSC related objects. The one that comes bundled with Quartz is this one called OSC receiver, and that's okay. If I just go onto the patch inspector for that, settings, you can specify a port number and add various types on the input. Now that's okay, but I do find it's a little flaky. And there's a third-party object called QCOSC, which seems a little bit more robust and a bit more fully featured. And QCOSC comes from hexler.net, and it's an additional plugin that you need to install for Quartz. Download it and then extract it or copy it into one of these folders. Again, I'll say more about plugins in a future video. This is one example of where an external third-party plugin is a little bit better than the built-in functionality in Quartz. So, QCOSC, not a lot there. Go onto the inspector, settings. You see I can specify a port and types. So, let's see what we can do here. Give it a port number. And then I'm just going to come over to Max. So I've got Max 7 open in the background here. And to talk between Max and Quartz, I need to use the udpsend object with a parameter of localhost and then a port number. Okay, there we go. So if you're familiar with Open Sound Control, you can label the values, anything that you choose. So if I create a prepend object with a /x, modify this, I'm now sending /x space 6, which is routed internally on port 10,000. You may have noticed that QCOSC immediately created a new output with this label. So go edit, duplicate this time, prepend Y, send that as well. If you keep an eye on the QCOSC object, as I change the value here, we get a new Y input. Okay. So I can now modify the XY position of the sprite. So I'll connect the X output to the X position, the Y to the Y position. Just going to change the values. In fact, let me just get rid of the audio for now. Put some fixed values here so we can see the square. He says, I think we've just gone off the edge of the screen for now. Better actually to use floats here. I'll tell you why in a second. So put this at 0, this at 0, we should be back in the center of the screen. Okay, so in the Quartz visualization world, the center of the coordinates is 0, 0. I want to go top right. It's 1, 1. Now it's slightly off the edge of the screen. If I just bring this back a little bit, there we go. You can can start to see it. And back to 0, 0. Now we're in the center of the screen. I'm going to use the picked slider object, which is in its basic form, it's like an XY controller. Change the values. Let's go between -100 and +100 on both axes. We can't use floats here, so what I need to do is scale these down so we can go between -1 and +1 on the X and Y axes. So a new divider object. I'll just duplicate this, Command D. And now we should be able to use the XY controller to adjust the XY position of the sprite. Okay, looking good. Alright, so we can communicate floats. Let's just come back on to the patch inspector for QCOSC. Settings, you'll see these values X and Y are numbers. What if we want to use something else? For example, text. Let's type some text in Max, just using a message box for now. A new prepend, this time let's call it in text. Connect to the udpsend. Okay, if I want to use text here, a few options. I want to convert it to an image, however, and then place that on the front of the sprite. So I'll type image here, use this object image with string. Let me just send this by clicking on Quartz here, and then we get an in-text inlet, which I'll now connect to string. This formats the text, the string, as an image, and I can place this image on the front of the sprite. Okay, you see we get Quartz. Maybe not so obvious, this is a little bit fuzzy. The font size defaults to 0.1. If I just increase this, you'll see it becomes a lot sharper. So it's usually best to go above 1 and maybe a little bit higher depending on the font to get some sharp text here. And if you want to change that, let's duplicate this. Keep an eye on the viewer. Great. Back to the inspector. Let's have a look. This time you see this is a string, so we can use different data types between the two programs. One more thing here. Another example of data type communication, or what we can do with information from Max. I want to change the color of the text here. To do that, I need to change the color of the sprite. So, a couple of ways of doing it. Type color here. Again, lots of effects. The built-in options are RGB color and HSL color. I'm going to go for RGB color because there's an object in Max that will give me RGB values. Now connect this to the color input of the sprite. Okay, so changing the color of the sprite rather than the text. Take these down a bit. Okay, so 111 is white, 000 is black. If I want a blue sprite for blue text, blue value of 1. Okay, but how can we control that from Max? Quite simply, maybe via the swatch. And the swatch gives us RGBA values, which is quite handy. Just going to split these off so we can have individual control of these. RGB. Just change the OSC labels for these. Adjust the swatch. Okay, you see we get labels here in alphabetical order: BGR, B, G, and R for red. Let's see if this works. Looking pretty good. Okay, so the good thing here is if I just put a float on the output of one of these, as I move this, it's giving us values between 0 and 1. Okay, and that's exactly the same values that the RGB color object in Quartz expects. So the swatch is a perfect object to use for interacting between Max and Quartz. So you don't have to do that, you can do it all in Quartz obviously, so you could edit the colors here, but if you want a bit more flexibility, if you're more used to working in the Max environment, then that's the way forward. Let's just connect this all back up then and see what we've got. So the audio, I'm going to control the width and the height here. And then via Max, I'm going to control the position and the colour. Really good. So I'm doing this all via the mouse at the minute, but you can see how easily it would be to connect MIDI devices, built-in Max control values that modify these data values and translate them into Quartz. Okay, thanks. Please leave any requests or questions in the comments.